She said, "My male best friend and I booked a hotel room to talk. If you trusted me, you wouldn't see it as cheating." I replied, "You're right, my trust issues are my problem." Then I hired a private investigator. When I played the 4K video of their talk on the projector at her family's Christmas dinner, I've got to get this out somewhere, because my entire life detonated a few months ago, and I'm still sorting through the wreckage. It all started with a conversation that was so completely out of touch with reality that I genuinely thought I was having a stroke. My girlfriend of 3 years, Grace, was standing in the living room of my house, holding an overnight bag. She told me her male best friend, a guy named Julian, was going through a personal crisis and needed a friend to talk to. That part was normal, or at least her version of normal. The part that made the record scratch in my head was when she announced they had booked a hotel room to have this talk for the entire night. I just looked at her, waiting for the joke to land. It never did. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that was not happening. A man and a woman, especially one who is supposed to be in a committed relationship, do not book a hotel room together to talk. That's not a thing in the real world. That's when she hit me with the line, the one that I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. She squared her shoulders, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "My male best friend and I booked a hotel room to talk. If you trusted me, you wouldn't see it as cheating." The sheer, uncut audacity of it was stunning. She wasn't just disrespecting me, she was trying to warp reality to make me the bad guy, the one with the problem. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't argue. Something inside me, something that had been dormant for a long time, just went ice cold. I looked right back at her and replied, "You're right, my trust issues are my problem." She smiled, a smug, victorious little smile. She thought she'd broken me, that I was finally caving to her nonsense. She had no clue that what I meant was that my trust in her was the problem, and I was about to solve it permanently. For some context, Grace and I had been together for 3 years. We lived in a house I bought and paid for long before she was in the picture. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. I built my logistics company from nothing, starting with 1 truck and a lot of sleepless nights. Because of that, I have very firm boundaries. I don't play games. I don't believe in having intimate friendships with the opposite gender when you're in a relationship, and I have a zero-tolerance policy for lies. When we got together, Grace acted like she was on the same page. She claimed to hate drama and said she loved that I was so direct and secure. It was a good act, I'll give her that. Julian was the one red flag I never should have let slide. He was her best friend from college, a guy she swore was basically her brother. I never bought it. He was a slick, trust fund kid whose family came from old money. He'd never worked a real day in his life, but drove a new Porsche every year. He always treated me with this polite condescension, like I was a simple workman he had to tolerate. Grace's family, especially her father, adored Julian. They saw him as one of them. I was the guy with dirt under his fingernails who had somehow managed to snag their precious daughter. The unspoken judgment was always there at family dinners. Early on, I laid down the law about Julian. No late-night calls, no one-on-one dinners. Our relationship came first. She argued, but eventually gave in, promising to keep things appropriate. Now I know she just got better at hiding their friendship. This hotel plan wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a power move. It was her testing the fence to see if the electricity was still on. Her speech about my trust issues confirmed it. She didn't want a partner. She wanted an ATM who would look the other way. The moment she walked out the door with her bag, I got to work. I didn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. I went into problem-solving mode. First call was to a private investigator. I found a guy named Frank, a former cop with a great reputation for being discreet and thorough. We met the next morning. I told him the whole story. I made it clear I didn't want suspicions. I wanted cold, hard, undeniable proof. He just nodded, his face unreadable. He'd heard it all before. I paid his retainer for a full week of surveillance and told him I wanted everything. Photos, receipts, and high-definition video. He assured me he could get me 4K footage that would leave no room for doubt. While Frank started his work, I started my own investigation. We had a joint checking account for bills, but our savings and investments were supposed to be separate. I spent the next 2 nights digging through years of financial statements. The picture that emerged was ugly. Grace had been systematically stealing from me. She was padding our household budget every month, claiming groceries cost more than they did, or that a utility bill was higher, and then skimming the difference into a secret bank account. It was small amounts at first, but it added up to well over $10,000 over the last year alone. But that wasn't the worst of it. A few months back, Julian had some drama involving a failed business venture. Grace had begged me to loan him money. I flat out refused. I told her I wasn't funding her friend's gambling habit or whatever he was wasting his family's money on. We had a huge fight about it, but I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. I found a series of wire transfers from her secret account directly to Julian, totaling $15,000. She hadn't just lied to me, she had stolen from our future to give to him. That was a level of betrayal I hadn't even considered. She had made her choice a long time ago. Frank called me on the 3rd day. He had already hit the jackpot. They hadn't just gone to the hotel. He sent me a secure link to a folder of photos. The first set showed them at a ridiculously expensive restaurant, the kind she always complained we couldn't afford. The second set was from a boutique jewelry store. One photo was a crystal-clear shot of Julian fastening a diamond bracelet onto Grace's wrist as she beamed at him. The final photos were of them checking into a 5-star hotel downtown. Frank confirmed he had eyes on them and that the next phase of his operation was underway. The next week was the hardest part. I had to pretend everything was fine. Grace came home from her talk acting like the perfect, caring girlfriend. She was glowing, telling me how she had been such a good friend to Julian and how he was feeling so much better now. There was no mention of the expensive dinner or the new bracelet sparkling on her wrist. I had to play the part of the boyfriend who had seen the error of his ways. I told her I'd done a lot of thinking and that she was right. My trust issues were my problem, and I was going to work on them. She ate it up. She told me how proud she was of me for being so mature and emotionally intelligent. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Then, exactly as I had predicted, the next stage of her plan began. Her mother called me. She launched into a speech about how thrilled she was that I was finally growing up and learning to accept Grace's deep and meaningful friendship with Julian. She said my jealousy had been a significant strain on their family. Then she dropped the bomb. She reminded me that their annual family Christmas dinner was in a few weeks. She said it would be the perfect opportunity for me to formally apologize to the family, and especially to Julian, for my past mistrust. She made it clear that Julian would be there, and that a public apology was expected. They weren't just disrespecting me, they were orchestrating my public humiliation. It was perfect. I agreed enthusiastically, telling her I couldn't wait to clear the air and start fresh. During the next few weeks, I moved in silence. I met with my lawyer and explained the situation. He confirmed what I already knew. The house was mine, and she had no legal claim to it. He drew up a formal eviction notice for me, dated for Christmas Day. I opened a new bank account at a different bank and had my company's income redirected there. I drained my half of our joint savings and closed the joint credit cards. I was methodically cutting every financial tie that bound me to her. Frank delivered the final evidence a week before the dinner. It was a small encrypted hard drive. Inside was a folder containing a detailed report, copies of their hotel and restaurant receipts, the appraisal for the bracelet, and 2 video files. The first video was security footage from the jewelry store. The second was the 4K footage from the hotel room. I watched only a few seconds, just enough to confirm the content. It was devastatingly clear. It was everything I needed. The night of the Christmas dinner felt surreal. We drove to her parents' house, a massive, soulless mansion designed to intimidate. The whole clan was there. Her smug father, her two-faced mother, and Julian, standing by the fireplace like he owned the place. He shook my hand with a smarmy grin and told me he was glad we could finally put all that drama behind us. The entire evening was a performance. I was the perfect guest, laughing at her father's bad jokes, complimenting her mother's cooking. Grace stuck to Julian's side, occasionally glancing over at me with a look of smug satisfaction. She thought she had won. After dinner, her father stood to make a toast. He talked about family, loyalty, and the importance of understanding. Then he looked right at me and raised his glass. "And a special toast to our son-in-law," he said, the term dripping with condescension, "for finally learning to trust in Grace's good judgment." The whole table applauded as I smiled and nodded. When they finished, I remained standing. I told them I was so moved by their generosity of spirit that I had prepared a small surprise of my own, a little Christmas video I'd put together to celebrate the occasion. An hour earlier, I'd gone out to my car to get a gift and had brought in a small, high-lumen projector. I had set it up on a side table, aimed at a large, blank wall in the dining room. Grace looked intrigued. Her father looked pleased, probably assuming I was about to play a sappy slideshow of their family photos. I pulled out a small remote and pressed a button. The projector whirred to life. The first image that flashed on the wall, in brilliant 4K, was the receipt from the jewelry store, with the price of the diamond bracelet clearly visible. A confused murmur went through the room. Then, the video started. It wasn't a slideshow. It was the security footage from the store, showing Julian putting that very bracelet on Grace's wrist. Her mother gasped. The next scene was them at the restaurant, feeding each other dessert and kissing. Grace's face had gone completely pale. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with panic. "What is this?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just let the video play. And then the final scene began. The hotel room. There was no audio, but the 4K video was so clear, so undeniable that no sound was necessary. The room was utterly silent, save for the sound of Grace's mother starting to sob. Her father looked like he was having a heart attack, his face turning a deep shade of purple. Julian looked like he had seen a ghost. I let it play for 30 seconds, an eternity of excruciating high-definition proof. Then I turned it off. The sudden return to the brightly lit dining room was jarring. I looked directly at Grace's father. "Here's to Grace's good judgment," I said, raising my glass. Then I turned to Grace. "You were right," I said, my voice even and calm. "My trust issues were my problem. And now, they're solved." I pulled the eviction notice from my jacket pocket and placed it on the table in front of her. "You have 30 days to remove yourself and your belongings from my property." I turned and walked out of the room. The explosion of shouting, crying, and accusations that erupted behind me was the only Christmas carol I needed to hear. I got in my car, blocked every number associated with her family, and drove home. The first thing I did when I got back to my quiet, empty house was change the locks. Not just the front door, but every single access point. It took me less than an hour. The revenge wasn't just in the reveal, it was in the cold, methodical cleanup. They wanted a show, and I gave them one they would never forget. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By the time I was finishing the last lock, my phone was vibrating non-stop from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Grace, screaming, crying, a complete meltdown. She left 6 more messages just like it before I blocked that number too. The next morning, a Saturday, she showed up at the house, pounding on the door and demanding to be let in to get her things. I spoke to her through the video doorbell. I told her that, per the legal notice I had served her, she had 30 days. I would arrange a time for her to retrieve her belongings under supervision. She started screaming about her rights. I just said, "Talk to your lawyer," and ended the call. That's when her father, Richard, got involved. By Monday morning, I had an email from a lawyer at a top-tier firm in the city. It was full of legal threats. They accused me of harassment, illegal surveillance, and public defamation. They demanded I destroy the video evidence and issue a formal apology, or they would sue me into the ground. They were trying to bully me, using their money and influence. It was exactly what I expected. I forwarded the email to my own lawyer, a guy named Sam, who specializes in messy domestic disputes. Sam laughed when he read it. He said they had no case. The surveillance was legal in our state, and showing the video to the very people involved in the conspiracy against me wasn't public defamation. It was a private matter. Sam drafted a response that was a work of art. It didn't just refute their claims. It went on the offensive. He included a detailed accounting of the $15,000 Grace had transferred to Julian, labeling it as theft. He mentioned her systematic skimming from our joint account. He concluded by stating that if they proceeded with any legal action, We would countersue for financial fraud and seek damages. Furthermore, we would subpoena both Grace and Julian for a full financial deposition, something Sam knew their old money families would want to avoid at all costs. The legal threats stopped immediately. Richard's expensive lawyers went completely silent. They had expected me to fold, to be intimidated. They misjudged me, just like his daughter had. A few days later, I got an unexpected message on social media from Grace's cousin, a woman named Sarah, who I'd always found to be the most normal one in the family. She said she was at the dinner and was disgusted by what her family had become. She told me the aftermath was a disaster. Julian had been disowned by his own family, who were furious about the public humiliation. His father was a prominent figure in the city, and the scandal was a stain on their reputation. Julian, cut off from his trust fund, had apparently vanished. Sarah also told me that Grace and her parents were in a full-blown war. They blamed her for bringing this disgrace upon them, and she blamed them for pushing her towards Julian in the first place. Grace was living at home, and it was a toxic environment. This information was useful. It confirmed my strategy was working. I wasn't just fighting Grace, I was dismantling the entire entitled ecosystem that had enabled her behavior. The 30-day eviction period was coming to an end. Grace, through her silent lawyer, finally arranged a date and time to pick up her things. I wasn't taking any chances. I hired 2 off-duty police officers to be present. When Grace arrived with her mother, her attitude had changed. The rage was gone, replaced by a sullen, defeated silence. Her mother refused to even look at me. They packed her belongings without a single word. As they were leaving, Grace paused at the door. She tried to say something, her voice cracking. "I really did," she started, but couldn't finish. I just looked at her and said, "It doesn't matter anymore." And it didn't. The final piece of the puzzle was Julian's family. I had my lawyer send a letter to his father's company. It was a simple, factual account of how Julian had accepted $15,000 stolen from me by my ex-girlfriend. We made no threats, just laid out the facts and attached the bank statements. We suggested that a quiet repayment of the stolen funds would be the cleanest way to resolve the matter and avoid any further public embarrassment for his family or his company. 2 weeks later, a cashier's check for the full amount arrived at my lawyer's office via courier. There was no note. The last few months have been quiet. I sold the house. Too many memories. I bought a smaller place downtown, closer to my office. I've been focusing on my business, hitting the gym, and reconnecting with friends I neglected during my time with Grace. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to another state to live with a relative, trying to start over. Julian is apparently still persona non grata with his family. As for her parents, their social standing took a major hit. A story that juicy, involving that much money and betrayal, doesn't stay quiet for long in those circles. They got their show, and the reviews were brutal.